Well, with us today we have Paul Zarembka, Professor of Economics at the University at Buffalo. Paul is an editor of Research in Political Economy since 1977. A series of 27 annual volumes addresses economic and political issues from the perspective of the social classes involved. He is the author of Toward a Theory of Economic Development and was editor of Frontiers in Econometrics. Paul, you're also more than a professor at University at Buffalo of Economics. You deal with basically the cutting edge research on 9/11 related topics, issues. Your latest piece is a critique of David Ray Griffin's book. Uh, uh, I'm sorry, I forget the name of his book, but anyways, the critique is on the planes and the phone calls made on the planes.
Right, so one chapter, yes.
One chapter.
And the book is something like 9/11, 10 years later, or something like that. The title of this book.
Now, is this critiquing these authors of the 9/11 movement? Is this something that you just fell into, or how did it come about that these giants are responding to you?
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it. Let me go back to how I published anything about 9/11, and that'll make a lot more sense. As you read there, I edit Research in Political Economy, which is a Marxist yearbook, which has come out almost every year since 1977. I mean, that's a long period of time for somebody to be the series editor of something like this, okay? It was first done by Elsevier Press in hardback, which is one of the top academic publishing houses in Europe, but also around the world, actually. And then they sold their rights to another publisher, and still in hardback with another publishing house. But the point is, they never gave me any problem with academic freedom. I mean, they was doing not always Marxist stuff, but it's guided toward, it shouldn't be inconsistent with doing class analysis. That's the bottom line, okay? And but they never gave me any problems with academic freedom. I mean, I never once heard any kind of comments such and such shouldn't be published, or can you think about it again, or whatever, okay? So when 9/11 happened, okay, I myself, I didn't have a strong reaction as to responsibility or anything like that. I just sort of absorbing what was happening. And it wasn't until February of 2002 that I went to Toronto to hear a talk by a guy named Michael Rupert, who basically convinced me now, I mean, I really have to understand what happened. One of the reasons why I felt I had to understand what happened on 9/11 is that part of Marxist theory is that the state serves the interests of the dominant class. So in a capitalist society, the capitalist class, okay? So it's logical, even though I mostly specialize in economic questions, this is really a question of a state. So it's kind of consistent with my intellectual work, okay? So it was a real opportunity, and I have no regrets, because it really does fit into the larger research project over the last 30 years that I've been involved with, okay? So that was in 2002, and almost immediately I got a couple of articles in the issue for 2002 about 9/11. Just two separate articles, not a whole issue, just two articles connected to 9/11. And I'll just comment right now that when I wrote the preface to that issue, it was in October of 2002. That means 13 months after September 11th. I did not even know that 3 towers collapsed on 9/11. I only thought about the Twin Towers and not the third World Trade Center 7 had collapsed. I didn't know about it then, because it's so blocked out of the media that even though I was watching it and going on the website and doing research, I didn't run across it, okay?
For how long is that?
Well, I don't remember now when I found out. I mean, maybe it was 2003 or 2004. I mean, it wasn't that long afterwards, but it wasn't then. I know for sure it wasn't in October 2002, because I said things in the preface that it revealed what questions I had in my mind, and that was not one of the questions I had in my mind. Okay. And so there was about 45 faculty members, and I don't remember how we started to talk to each other. We were talking to each other about 9/11 from all kinds of different disciplines, but they were faculty members. Many of them retired faculty members, but faculty members anyway, academics. Okay. And somebody said, well, let's do a book on 9/11, an edited book. And I immediately offered the fact that I could offer the publishing house for that exercise, for that project, because I knew that my publisher would not make any questions about the academic freedom, and although it's a touchy topic, that they wouldn't raise any questions about the topic or my decision to do it or anything else, and it would be published. I mean, that's kind of important for a publisher, for an author to work on a topic when he knows it's going to be published. Makes a difference. Initially, it was supposed to be done with Jim Fetzer, and well, there's stories about him and me that could be told, I suppose. But what eventually happened was that he found another opportunity to write an article rather than edited a book, and thought that was better use of his time than doing this editing thing, which actually I'm glad that worked out that way, and given what happened later. But so that's how I fell into being the editor, and then it was a question of some of these academics making proposals, and there's details about how that's done, but it's not worth discussing.
Well, your book here, The Hidden History of 9/11, you are the editor. You also contributed in the book, and one of the contributors is David Ray Griffin.
Right.
Have you had any relationship with him before you put the book together, or how did that all come about?
I don't remember how much relationship we had before the book. There might have been some, but it wouldn't have been a lot. But of course, when the book arose, he was not on that list of 45. If I remember correctly, he was. Let me move away from him for the moment and come back. There's another professor who was invited in the book, and that's Stephen Jones from Brigham Young University, and he was going to make a contribution, but the university basically started to threaten him, and in fact they forced him out. They hadn't forced him out and forced him into retirement. Sorry. They hadn't quite done that yet, but he was getting nervous, and therefore he backed off from making a contribution. He was doing it, and then he pulled back. Okay, and at that point, I think it was at that point that David Ray Griffin got involved, and he and I have over the years had lots of interchanges, and actually very good ones. I mean, mostly he would, for example, he had many more contacts than I did, and he would give me an evaluation about XYZ. I mean, some person out there, whether he's a reliable person, trustworthy person, that kind of thing. Whatever. I mean, things I kept confidential, but were helpful for me in moving forward. It wouldn't, maybe there would be a 3-month period before we wouldn't have a contact, but then something would come up and we'd be in contact again. But yes, he was quite helpful for me, basically all along the way. Okay. On the other hand, I mean, it's not inconsequential that I didn't start from reading his books and becoming a 9/11 truther from his books, because the reason why I say that is because some people who went that route. And he's now has 10 books. People who went that route, some of them are so thankful to his contributions that they can't sort of let go of the idea that he also has problems from my point of view, he has problems in what he's writing. I didn't have that. Well, I don't think I would have that baggage anyway, because I'm just not that kind of person who relates to other people as gods or something. As some godfathers of a movement or something like that. But if it were to be the case, I would be more indebted to Michael Rupert than to David Ray Griffin. Okay. Rupert hasn't published much since a book called Crossing the Rubicon, so it doesn't. doesn't really play much of a factor in the modern movement.
What was it about Michael Rupert? What was he presenting that showed you that maybe you ought to really get involved?
I remember most the beginning of his talk. In the beginning of his talk, he showed the Zapruder film of the assassination of Kennedy, and he showed it 10 times. And he said, you know, you've been brainwashed, okay? That video clearly shows Kennedy's head going backwards. The last shot has Kennedy's head going backwards, okay? That means the shot came from the front, okay? And they have been propagandizing you to ignore that simple image for all of these years. And for a long time, we didn't even have the Zapruder film, and then when we got a hold of it, they steered us away from the obvious, okay? And so that got me really into well, now we have a modern case of the Kennedy assassination, but it's much bigger than the Kennedy assassination. Although I think the Kennedy assassination, the success of the Kennedy assassination set the stage for things that followed afterwards, including 9/11. In other words, if we had overcome that, maybe 9/11 never would have happened. Only recently I think that the best book on the Kennedy assassination that was ever written has been published by Jim Douglas, Douglass, 2 S's. And the title is kind of a confusing title. It's something like Why JFK Died and Why It Matters. I don't think that's the exact title, but it's something like that. That was, I mean, just that one book, from my point of view, puts it all together. Okay, I mean, it doesn't exactly name who exactly shot the shots. Okay, but it comes damn close to that, and it shows why more. I mean, he's even more into why Kennedy was so hated by the establishment. Not just by the mafia, kind of, which has been talked about, but by industrialists and the military. The military was infuriated with how he handled Cuba, for example. And anyway, so he develops the high degree of hostility on the part of the establishment, the military and the industrial stuff, both sides of it, against Kennedy, that developed over time and basically set up an environment where he had to be gotten rid of. And then he goes into sort of even the mechanics of how it was done. For example, I mean, I know this is a little bit off topic, but
no, go ahead. You're fine.
One example is there was a deaf mute person. I don't remember his age, but he was 30 years old. I don't know, who was on the overpass looking down on the plaza, and he saw the shooter shooting Kennedy from the plaza. Okay. And he went back to his father and told his father what he saw, and his father insisted that he never tell anybody because it'll just cause trouble for your life. His father finally died, and now and only subsequently now as he revealed his point of view of that story. I think that's just one. I mean, it's a whole bunch of stuff, you know, by doctors and Kennedy's scalp and how the path of the motorcade was changed and all, you know, many different things. But it puts it all together. Just to continue this, Douglas is on. He's told me. I mean, he came to St. Bonaventure a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago, and it's quite clear that he has no problem with the 9/11 truth was also an inside job, just like the Kennedy was. And but he's doing work now on the two. On Robert Kennedy and on Martin Luther King, and on Malcolm X, and that's going to take him quite a while. So I don't know if we'll ever hear what he writes about 9/11 or not.
Well, he certainly has enough topics to cover if he ever does.
Right.
Well, speaking of the Kennedy assassination, and it was so long ago, and we see what's come about that, which is pretty much nothing. Are you a little concerned that maybe the 9/11 movement is going to go the same route? Do you see a difference in the 9/11 movement as compared to the people that had a clue as to what was really going on with Kennedy?
I'm not sure. The reason why I'm not sure is when 9/11 when I first started getting involved with 9/11, it was much sooner after the event than at least for me, than was the Kennedy thing. If I think I'm not projecting my personal experience too much when I say that American society got more critical of the Warren Commission much later than they got critical of the 9/11 Commission report. I mean, I think we are time-wise ahead of that. So that's the positive side of things, okay? But the negative side of things is also that I think there's a lot of infiltration by agents in the 9/11 movement, confusing things and stirring things up and having us fight each other and stuff like that, which we have to try. Well, those of us who are not agents have to keep a distance from, but still they're there, and you have to not let them divert your attention too much. And I will also say that, I mean, this is, I think is one of the key things that stayed in my mind. There was a 9/11 Truth Conference in 2006 in Chicago. And the lawyer who represented the Martin Luther King family for the civil trial against the assassination of Martin Luther King, that was in 1999, I think. The lawyer who represented, a guy named, again, I forgot, William Pepper, spoke at that conference, and he was just warning the 9/11 people that there is going to be agents everywhere. And he said, and he gave his own example, which is that in that civil trial, there was even somebody he really did trust. And even that person turned out to be an agent. He's not saying that everybody's an agent, but an agent can be somebody who is really a surprise to you ex post. And I think that could very well be the case here.
Well, as an editor, it kind of serves a purpose that you're a critic as well. I think that you review, and some of the stuff that you review. I wonder if you're touching on things that you don't even. I mean, some of the people that you have critiqued in the past, it's possible that they may be plants, and what you're doing is you're holding the feet to the fire of the leaders of the movement to make sure that we don't get carried away as the official story has gotten carried away, or the
yeah, but let me I should correct you a little bit. I actually didn't do that much critique of within the movement until recently. It was more a critique of the government's story,
right,
about, for example, insider trading. Okay, but certain things happened within the last 6 or 7, no, maybe 4 months, which have alerted me to problems within the movement, which I felt I was in a position to say something about, not just watch from the sidelines. So now I'm beginning to move more into my own space within the movement, one of which, and I'll just, this is not critical, this is supportive, okay? One of which is to be supportive of a group called the Citizens Investigating Team, which investigated what happened at the Pentagon, okay? And that's highly controversial. I mean, it's controversial on a big-time basis. And it's, I can describe, if you want, a little bit about what they're saying.
Sure, go right ahead.
But before I do that, let me just say that there are people in the movement who are being accused of being agents precisely because they are trying to do everything they can to make sure the movement does not buy into the results of this investigation. So can I tell you a little bit about it?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Citizen Investigating Team. Actually, there was just 2 guys. They live in Los Angeles, and they'd heard these stories about for example, that French author who said that no plane hit the Pentagon, and it was an unbelievable story that we were being told. And then there was controversy around whether that's accurate or not, but this is, this is more in Europe than it is in the United States, the idea that no plane hit the Pentagon. But they decided for themselves, well, there must be some way to find out evidence about what happened at the Pentagon. And what they did over a period from, I think, 2007 to 2009, or plus or minus half a year or something like that, is they went to the area around the Pentagon and looked at the list of witnesses to what happened at the Pentagon that was published in some archives. I mean, the names of the people who were there and found out what they said. Went to at least some of those names and actually interviewed them about what they actually witnessed. Now that set of people, maybe let's say, is 50 to 70 people. Among that set of people, what they learned was that 13 of them were in a very good position to actually observe how the plane, whatever came into the Pentagon, where it was actually flying over, where it was. And it turns out, let me backtrack a second. The government's story is there was 100 witnesses. There's people on the throughways around there. All kinds of people were looking and saw the plane hit the Pentagon. Okay, what they're saying, well, look, slow down a bit. How many people were actually in a position to see the flight path and not just see an explosion and say the plane hit the Pentagon? And so they narrowed it down to people who were, for example, two cases are two police officers getting gas or doing whatever they're doing at the gas station, Citgo gas station, on, I think it's the west side of the Pentagon, and they are both testifying that the plane came. They're now looking at the Pentagon. They're on the west side of the Pentagon, they're looking at the Pentagon, and they're saying the plane is coming to the left. Coming to the left means it's coming from the north side, not the south side. It comes from the north side of that Citgo gas station. You can just look at the map of, of where that gas station at that time was compared to the Pentagon, and you can see that the plane could not have hit the light poles that the government that were knocked down somehow or other that day and go into the Pentagon. It could not have gone like this. Okay, the plane could not have gone like this. It had to go. It had not enough time and maneuverability to make that kind of turn to get into. Okay, so therefore, that they found 13 witnesses, some at the gas station, some other places, who were in a position to know where the plane was relative to the Citgo gas station, and every single one of them said it's to the north side of the Citgo gas station. Okay. And they found nobody who said the opposite. Nobody who said that it was on the south side of the Citgo gas station. And furthermore, all these other 100 people who were blah, 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 were not in a position to know either way, one way or another. So the people who were in a position to know had a unanimous answer to the question about where the plane came in. And furthermore, if the plane came in on the north side, then the light poles would have been knocked down on the north side, not on the south side. Okay, the fact that the planes were not knocked down on the south side suggests to them the second step of the whole ball game, and that is that the plane actually went over the light poles and actually over the Pentagon, and there was a timed explosion right at the time they went over the Pentagon, and to create a deception. Okay. A deception that the plane actually came in as the government claims, namely south of the Citgo gas station, hitting light poles and going into the Pentagon. Okay. Anyway, so I am convinced that they're into the truth about what happened. Okay, and many other people are also, but there's other people who that evidence is so stark and convincing that there are other people who are doing everything they can to knock it out of any stature.
And possibly at the same time exposing themselves as
right.
agents of
right.
some sort.
I mean, we may draw that conclusion about certain. I mean, some of them will be, yes, some of them will be agents, but some of them will be just individuals who have a different agenda.
Out of the
whatever.
13 that were involved in really having a chance to see where the plane was, how many of them claimed actually to see the plane hit the building?
No, I won't say none. I will say very few or none, because most of them were deceived. In other words, I mean, what would you do?
They thought they saw it.
They thought they saw it because
They
plane.
did the math.
Right. Huh?
They did the math. They saw a plane coming over and then an explosion, so the assumption is
That it was due to that plane that
Right.
they just saw. Okay, that's the deception. Okay, I think there was a couple of people. I think there was a couple of people who may not have said that, and maybe there. And I know there's a couple. I know for sure that the people who did this work interviewed even afterwards the witnesses who said it went over the Pentagon, and I know one of them, for example, said, well, anything could have happened. I mean, in other words, after realizing that maybe they didn't see what they thought they saw, they agreed that it was possible. Okay, but none of them, I don't think any of them actually said they saw the plane go over the Pentagon, because that wasn't the question. The question they were asked was the path. Okay, the path was north of the Citgo gas station, and there's no way you can get over. You can't have the damage into the Pentagon, which was a diagonal this way, if the plane's coming this way. So the plane therefore had to go over, and the light poles didn't go down here, but they tried to trick you by
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we do have. You have talked about so many other issues on 9/11.
Right.
I would like to be able to do this again with you sometime and cover some of the other issues. If you're willing to, I would like to ask you another question, which is about the economics of 9/11 and some of the evidence that's out there that there was insider trading, which you being a professor of economics can talk
Right.
pretty plainly about.
Right. Now, that's an extremely interesting topic for me. I mean, because, as you say, my background. But my background is not just as an economist. As you read out, one of my books is Frontiers in Econometrics. Okay, and econometrics is applying statistical theory to economic theory and data. And that's in part my background. Okay. In 2004, the government puts out the 9/11 Commission report. If you look at that report, they go back and they refer to major newspaper articles. They don't actually name the articles, but I could name the articles from places like Barron's and maybe the Wall Street Journal. I'm not quite sure, but for sure Barron's. There was a number of financial publications which said there was massive insider trading in American Airlines stock and United Airlines stock and some other financial instruments before 9/11 in order to take advantage of making profits of this disaster. Okay, and and that lasted for about a month. I mean, these articles in financial press, people could pick up the data and look and see there was really some very strange numbers going on. Okay. I think now, in retrospect, that what they thought they were going to get is they thought they were going to be able to prove that bin Laden did it, because they were going to be able to make a connection between the people who did the financial transactions and bin Laden. I think that's what these financial people who were outside
Interesting.
the thing, I think that's what they were thinking. Okay, I can't prove that, I'm just thinking. Okay, but anyway, it died after about a month. Nothing much more was heard until the 9/11 Commission report comes out and says, sorry guys, there's nothing there. We investigated it. We investigated all kinds of financial instruments, including United Airlines and American Airlines. And yes, there was heavy action and put options, which I can explain if you want, in United and American Airlines stocks before 9/11, but the reasons were other than foreknowledge of what was going to happen on 9/11. Do you want me to talk about what is a put option?
Well, yeah. I mean, you're a professor. I think
Yeah.
that'd be.
Yeah. Well, a put option is basically saying if I either, well, for a moment I'll say if I own a stock and I think it might fall in price. Suppose let's take something not United Airlines and the American Airlines for a moment. Let's suppose General Motors, okay? And General Motors stock has gone up, okay? So you see it's gone up quite a bit and you say to yourself, I want to protect myself against the fact that it might start to go down quickly. Then I can buy a put option, okay? And the put option would say that in the next month and a half, I have the right to sell the stock at a named price, which is called the strike price for that next month and a half. Okay, I have to pay for that option, but I want to protect myself. But you can also do it even without owning the stock. You can buy a put option and say to yourself, well, if this stock goes down, I'm gonna wait till it goes down, buy it, and then sell it the same day at that price that I've negotiated as an option for me. That's what a put option can do for you. So for American Airlines and United Airlines, it so happens that both of those stocks were around $30 before 9/11. Around $30, okay? They actually went down to about $17 afterwards. So that means if you had a put option for $30 after 9/11, you could sell for $30 after you bought it for 17 or 18 or something like that. And you make a substantial profit. Okay, are we squared away on what the game is?
Yeah.
Okay. So, government reports that no, there was put options done, substantial put options in both United and American, but they were not due to foreknowledge about 9/11. That's what they said. One sentence in the 9/11 Commission report, and then they had a relatively long paragraph. Well,
in other words, take our word for it, fellas.
Right. You're right. That's right. Okay. Now, I mean, if I want to put it kind of, well, David Ray Griffin wrote a book around that time, citing what the government was, and he went through, as typical David Ray Griffin kind of argument, he went through about 5-page argument about why the sentence was illogical, about why the presentation about the government was illogical. Okay. And at the end of it, he pointed out the fact that an article was going to appear in the Journal of the American Statistical Association. No, sorry, Journal of Business was scheduled to appear in the Journal of Business, which says an econometric article, which says the opposite, that there was high probability, never certainty in statistics, high probability of insider trading in those put options for American Airlines and United Airlines. Okay. Well, okay, and well, when the book you're referring to, Hidden History of 9/11, was first published in 2006 in hardcover and then 2008 in softcover, in both versions. But now we're talking about in 2006, the hardcover version, first version. I said the same thing. Okay, I reported now it's published. I reported in detail what this professor had said, a professor named Podesman from the Journal of Business. Nobody can criticize the Journal of Business in terms of its reputation. Okay, and I quoted that, and I spent a little bit of quoting of the Government Commission report, but not nearly as much as David Ray Griffin did. I'm not as heavy into logical arguments as he is, and just generally speaking. Okay, so for me, I can make a couple arguments, two or three arguments against their avoiding the issue and let it go, and then go to what this Professor Podesman had published. Okay, well, in retrospect, and this is important. In retrospect, we were both kind of snookered, Griffin and myself. Okay, how were we snookered? Turns out that the government, when it had the 9/11 Commission report, they had not released any. I mean, you had footnotes, but the footnotes you had no identification much of what it was in the footnotes. So I mean, it's neither he nor I nor anyone else who's critical would buy into something they can't read. I mean, okay, but. In January 14th of 2009, the government started reproducing about certain like 35% or something like that of the background material for the 9/11 Commission report, including the background reports for the insider trading. And I'll talk about just one of those two stocks, American Airlines stock. The government had said that there was a financial advisor who faxed his clients on December 9th, Sunday, September 9th, to do put options for American Airlines. And this is what the government says in 2004. And that those transactions took place the next day. And that explains why there's a lot of put options on American Airlines. Well, for us in 2006, that's not good enough. I mean, you're just making an assertion without proof. But they had the proof behind them. I mean, they had. Okay, now I'm going to tell you why I think it is proof. I don't think it's not. I don't think it's a fake. Okay. Why do I think so? Because what they had was they had investigated the actual. They found the newsletter. It's an options, I think it's an options hotline newsletter, that's what it's called. I mean, there must be hundreds of different faxes and newsletters going on all the time among the financial community. I mean, it's big time business, right? Okay. And this is only one of them, okay? Well, anyway, they found this, that it was options hotline, and they went out and they talked to the editor, and the editor, and they found out, well, they would even know the names of who did the transactions, and they interviewed like 27 people who they knew had done the transactions, who were also subscribers to the newsletter. And these 25 people said, yes, we did do it because of the options hotline, okay? And they found another similar number of people who also did the trade, who were also subscribers to the options hotline. They didn't interview everybody, but they interviewed sort of half the people, okay? So, and they now named the newsletter editor, the person's name, the hotline, and I also found out separately exactly what they actually had recommended to, I mean, the actual text of the fax. It's the whole thing. I mean, they don't name the people who actually made the put options, but that would have been illegal. I mean, you're revealing private information. You can't do it. They did what I would expect them to do, okay? So that's why I sort of concluded that, I mean, if you could say we're snookered or whatever, I mean, whatever, okay? So, but there's a very important warning there. The very important warning there is that the government, and the final analysis, the government has a huge amount of information in its pocket that they're not letting out, or they let out when they feel like letting out, okay? And there's always a danger that you're going to get trapped. I'll give you another example of that in a few minutes if you want me to. But
sure.
Of one that may happen. But before you want me to give it to you now?
No, you can go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead with this. Well, anyway, so, and this is what the work I did over the summer. When I put all that two and two together, I said, well, wait a minute. Well, I talked to a guy who was against the 9/11 movement. Okay, he thinks we're dealing with myths, and he's trying to debunk us. Okay, and he weren't communicating by email, and he assumed that I would accuse the options hotline editor of being in on the inside job, that I would be, and I didn't even think of that. I mean, for me, enough is enough. I mean, they had it right, okay, and he was surprised when I didn't go that route. But nevertheless, for me, that doesn't mean the story's all over, because there's lots of financial transactions that took place that day. And as I was beginning to think about it, actually, if you were trying to profit off 9/11 and you knew it was coming, would you have likely have gone to the two stocks that would be the most likely to be impacted and expose yourself to people finding out that you were behind those transactions? So I didn't think about that before. I was kind of, whatever. I got, as I said, snookered a little bit. Okay, I'm not too much blaming myself. I'm just a little bit commenting. Okay, so anyway, so I looked at it turns out, and this I knew about, but I was waiting. There was two other publications that were coming out in econometrics about the same topic of insider trading and put options before 9/11. One of them just got published like in May of this year. I was kind of waiting for that one to come out because both of them were unpublished, and you don't want to do too much with things that are not yet published because things can change. And the other one is submitted for publication but hasn't been published yet, but it's actually a much more massive study. Anyway, and both of those came to the same conclusion as Podesman did, that there was high probability of insider trading in financial instruments before 9/11, not necessarily American and United Airlines. I mean, there's other things going on, okay? Including, and now this is important, including not a specific stock, but the S&P 500, which is is one of the three key indexes. You know, you can speculate on the index as well as on a particular stock with put options. So and this was three professors coming out of University of Wisconsin-Madison who had produced an econometric study that there was insider trading in S&P 500, and which is particularly interesting because, first of all, there's many more transactions in it than there is in American and United stocks, so it's much more difficult to accuse anybody of having prior knowledge with so many other people involved. Okay, you can't name individuals. But even furthermore, not everything that the government released was a benefit to them, because one of the things that they released, I mentioned in January of 2009, one of the things they released was actually a statement that we could not do any investigation of put options in S&P 500 because it's too complicated. It's too many people involved. Okay, so they precisely denied that they investigated something, and then in the 9/11 Commission report, they claimed that they, across the board, that there was no evidence of insider trading. We investigated fully. Okay, they themselves have provided evidence that they did not investigate fully, and it turns out that the econometric study says that there was insider trading on S&P 500.
Well, this is new information.
This
yes?
is new information. This is May of
was
this year.
Was this presented by you at the
Toronto hearings?
Hearings
Yes,
and
right.
okay.
And then there was also another study by three people in Switzerland, which I also dealt with. That's not yet published. It's more complicated. I can do it, but I think we don't have enough time to deal with it. But let me just say that even putting those three together doesn't answer all questions. So part of my work for the so-called Toronto hearings in September was to put those pieces together and try and move the next step forward.
Okay.
And I think that's enough for us to talk about at this particular moment.
Okay.
But I could tell you, could tell you an example about what.
Please do, because that you brought it up. I wanted to ask, what do you have a warning for us?
Yeah, I give another example. Okay. When the 9/11 Commission report was doing its investigations, it was interviewing everybody. I mean, all kinds of people across the map, including the Secretary of Transportation, Norman Mineta. Norman Mineta is like in a room like this. He's being interviewed, he's being taped, and he's sworn to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and whatever you have to do. Okay. And Mineta says in this discussion, there's issues about when Cheney left the room to go to the bunker, that what the timing of that was, but that's not what I want to focus on. There was another issue that Mineta was talking about, and that is that as he was giving his testimony, he says that he was in the room where Cheney was in the room before whatever happened at the Pentagon, which of course I have a different story. Okay, before whatever happened at the Pentagon happened, there is a young officer who comes in and asks Cheney, is told that the plane, or tells Cheney the plane, quote unquote, is 50 miles out. Do the orders still stand? And Cheney says yes. It didn't say what the orders are, but the orders, okay. And then it's 30 miles out. There's another warning, it's 30 miles out, and then there's a warning at 10 miles out. Now this is Mineta, okay. Mineta says that when the same officer says the plane is at 10 miles out, do the orders still stand? Cheney snaps his head around and says, of course they still stand. Okay, so then we go to whatever happened. Okay, now, how do you interpret what the orders were that were not specified? Okay, the 9/11 movement, most people have been saying that basically by logical deduction of some sort or another, that Cheney was saying that the orders stand not to shoot down this incoming thing, okay? But recently, I mean, I don't even want to cite the source because it's not, I don't think it's that solid yet, but somebody else has claimed that they know from a general, okay, that in fact the orders were to shoot down the plane, not to not shoot down the plane, okay? The point of what I'm saying is you make a big story about an inference that it means do not shoot down the plane when the government has the actual facts of what happened, okay? And they decide one day to release the fact you got it wrong. It was to shoot down the plane. It just didn't happen. That, you know, that then you undermine the story. You undermine an alternative interpretation of what happened on 9/11.
And the individual that is interpreting.
Yes, sir. Right. Right. So that's an example. I'm not even concluding that particularly in this particular instance what it was. I'm giving but I can give you a much more dramatic example where I think it's silly. Okay. In the other case, there's a site on the web called What Really Happened. Okay, and a site on what really happened. I used to watch it quite a bit, but I don't much anymore. It's a libertarian site. Okay, they're very anti-government, you know, whatever. Okay, and so the fact that 9/11 happened is for them part of the picture. Okay, part of the, you know. So they're not. Okay, in some ways that's great because they're pushing the rest of us toward truth. I mean, toward, you know, that, you know, you have to look at what they say. Okay. But one of the things that this Michael Rivero, who edits or is principal spokesperson or whatever of what really happened, he said over and over again that that in his view, the plane hit the Pentagon, okay, and that the government knows that, okay, and they're going to let us fight over the plane not hitting the Pentagon for as long as we feel like playing around it. And then they will come out one day with the evidence that the plane hit the Pentagon, and they will smash the 9/11 movement to smithereens. Withhold the idea is you withhold information and let them fight us, and then but you hold the weapon back. Okay. From my point of view, I'm just, you know, my opinion. That's totally silly. I mean, I'm not saying it's silly that the government didn't hold them down. It's totally silly to not deal with evidence. And like the evidence I described to you about the light poles, that evidence is convincing to me, okay, and it's convincing to many of the people. Therefore, I don't expect the government will ever show us videos from gas stations, from the Pentagon, from the hotels that are around the Pentagon, showing us videos of a plane going in the way the government said it is, because it didn't happen that way. Okay, that's, you know, so.